The last cry of humanity. The stars above Earth seemed peaceful, but beneath the calm, something dark was brewing. The galaxy had no idea what humanity was about to do. Earth had always been a quiet place in the vastness of space, hidden behind the noise of the stars. But now, Earth's time had come, and they had one final message to send. It would be their last cry to the galaxy. A message of warning. A message of fear. It had all started years ago, the moment humanity decided to take a stand. The galaxy saw them as weak, just another insignificant species struggling for survival. But humanity had grown stronger. They learned the ways of the stars, how to fight, how to survive. They were no longer the helpless beings they once were. They had become something to fear. They had become a force the galaxy would never forget. But the galaxy did not see them as a threat. They were the last ones to know what humanity had become. The aliens had their own battles to fight, their own worries. They did not care about Earth. They did not think a small planet, buried in the corner of the galaxy, could ever pose a real danger. They ignored the warnings from Earth's scouts. They laughed at the human defense fleets. They underestimated humanity's power. It was a mistake they would regret. But by the time they realized the truth, it would be too late. The message started as a whisper. It began in secret, in a small room hidden deep within Earth's most secure facility. Earth's leaders gathered, knowing that this message would be their last chance to make their voices heard. The enemy was coming. It was only a matter of time before they reached Earth's doorstep. The humans knew that they had no allies to turn to, no more time to prepare. The fate of their people would be sealed soon, one way or another. "We must send them a message," said General Harrison, the leader of Earth's defense forces. "The galaxy needs to know what happens when you push humanity too far." The room grew silent. They knew the consequences of what they were about to do. They had heard the stories of what the universe had done to those who dared to stand up against the powerful forces of the galaxy. They had seen entire civilizations wiped out for simply being in the way. But this was different. Humanity was not just a small planet, hidden among the stars. They had power, and they were not going to back down. With trembling hands, the leaders authorized the transmission. The message would be broadcast across the galaxy, to every corner of the universe. It would be the last warning humanity would ever give. The last cry before they were silenced. The message was simple, it was short, but it was powerful. It echoed with the fear and determination of a species that had nowhere left to run. The words were direct, clear, and unwavering. "We are humanity. We have come to the stars. We are not your enemy. But if you strike us, you will regret it. We will fight until the last breath. And if we fall, you will feel our wrath." The message was sent with a powerful burst of energy, carried across the galaxy through advanced communication channels. It reached every corner of the galaxy. Even the farthest, most isolated planets heard the cry of Earth. Some ignored it, dismissing it as an empty threat. Others, however, felt a chill down their spines. They had heard the tales of Earth's resilience. They had heard the stories of humans standing strong against impossible odds. But no one knew what to expect. No one knew the true power that humanity had hidden for so long. The message was not just a warning. It was a declaration, a promise that no matter what happened, humanity would never be forgotten. They would fight. They would stand tall. They would never bow to anyone. The silence that followed the transmission was deafening. For a moment, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The universe waited. Would the message be taken seriously? Or would Earth's final cry be ignored like so many others before it? But soon, the silence was shattered. The first response came quickly, faster than anyone had expected. It wasn't a fleet, not yet. It was a warning. A dark warning from an unknown source. The lights on Earth's communication devices flickered, signaling the arrival of a new message. The galaxy had answered, but it wasn't a message of peace. It wasn't a message of understanding. It was something much darker. The message was simple, just two words. Two words that would haunt humanity forever. Prepare to die. Fear surged through the hearts of those who heard it. Earth's leaders knew that they were not prepared for what was coming. They had no idea who these beings were. They had no idea what kind of force they were facing. But they knew one thing. The galaxy had just opened a door, and the creatures on the other side were not interested in negotiations. They were here to destroy. And Earth's final cry had just begun. The days following the transmission were filled with tension. Humanity was on edge, watching the stars for any sign of the enemy. The message had been sent, but it was clear now that it was not enough to stop what was coming. The galaxy had heard their cry, and the response had been swift and terrifying. Two simple words echoed in their minds: prepare to die. On Earth, the leaders gathered again. They had no choice but to prepare for war. There was no way to know what they were facing, but they had to be ready. General Harrison stood before a large map, pointing at the locations where humanity's most important defense fleets were stationed. We don't know who or what we're up against, but we can't afford to be caught off guard, he said, his voice steady, but filled with the weight of the situation. The time to act is now. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon we have must be ready. The enemy is coming, and they will not show mercy. The council room was silent, every member knowing the gravity of the situation. They had never been in a fight like this before. They had faced challenges, yes, but nothing like this. The enemy was unknown, and they had no idea what kind of power they were dealing with. The silence was broken when the first reports started to come in. It was not long before Earth's long-range sensors detected movement beyond the edge of the solar system. A massive fleet was approaching. The ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Huge, dark, and ominous, they seemed to glide through the stars with an eerie quietness. There was no sound, no warning. They were simply there, on the edge of the galaxy, moving toward Earth. The general looked at the screen in front of him, his face growing pale. He had seen many battles in his life, but nothing had prepared him for this. The enemy fleet was vast, stretching across the horizon like a dark cloud. Their numbers were overwhelming. It would take everything humanity had to even stand a chance. The time has come, General Harrison said, his voice barely a whisper. Prepare for battle. The news spread like wildfire across the globe. Every country, every city, every citizen now knew the truth. Humanity was facing an enemy unlike any other, and their survival was uncertain. The fear was palpable, but so was the resolve. They would not go down without a fight. Across Earth, preparations for war began. Ships were loaded with ammunition, soldiers were trained in rapid response tactics, and every available resource was funneled into the war effort. Humanity was united in a way that had never been seen before. The planet's nations set aside their differences, focused on one common goal: survival. As the days passed, the enemy fleet drew closer, and the countdown to the final battle began. Every hour brought them closer to a war that would determine the fate of Earth, and possibly the entire galaxy. It was then that a second transmission was received from the enemy. This one was not just words. It was a warning, a direct challenge. The human race is a threat. The cold, mechanical voice said, "You have shown your defiance. You will now face the consequences. Prepare to be wiped from the stars." The message sent shivers down the spine of every human who heard it. There was no room for negotiation. There was no hope for peace. Earth was now an enemy to the galaxy, marked for destruction. General Harrison stood in front of the War Council, a grim determination in his eyes. We knew this day would come. We knew that we would be tested. But we are humanity. And we don't back down. Not now, not ever. The days leading up to the final battle felt like years. The sense of urgency and fear was overwhelming. People worked around the clock, knowing that every second counted. The military had already begun deploying Earth's most advanced warships into position. They were ready for the enemy. But even the best technology on Earth could not prepare them for what was coming. The enemy's fleet continued to move forward, faster and faster. It was clear they were not just arriving. They were on a mission to destroy Earth, and they would stop at nothing to accomplish their goal. The question on everyone's mind was simple. Would humanity be able to fight back? Would they survive this invasion? No one knew for sure, but one thing was clear. The final cry had been sent, and Earth would not go quietly into the night. As the fleet of warships prepared for the battle of a lifetime, a strange feeling swept across Earth. It was a feeling of unity, a feeling that humanity had never experienced before. For the first time in history, everyone on Earth was on the same side. They had one common enemy. And no matter how terrifying that enemy was, humanity was ready to face it. The countdown had begun. The clock was ticking, and Earth's final battle was about to start. The day had finally arrived. Earth's defense fleet, a powerful armada of warships, was in position, ready for the oncoming battle. The enemy's fleet had reached the outer edge of the solar system, and the tension was unbearable. The countdown to the final confrontation had begun. Every person on Earth, from the leaders in command centers to the citizens in the streets, felt the weight of the moment. The battle that would decide humanity's fate was about to unfold. General Harrison stood at the helm of Earth's most advanced warship, the Terra Titan. His eyes were fixed on the screens ahead, where the enemy fleet appeared as a shadowy presence in the distance. The sheer size of their ships made his heart race. They were unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Massive, armored vessels that seemed to swallow up the stars around them. The enemy was clearly prepared for war, but so was Earth. "We've trained for this moment," Harrison muttered under his breath. His hands tightened on the command chair, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "We cannot fail. Humanity cannot fail." Across the globe, millions of soldiers were stationed on the front lines. On the Terra Titan, command crews worked tirelessly, ensuring that every weapon system was primed, every shield was activated, and every tactical advantage was in place. They were ready. The fleet of Earth's warships was ready. The fight for survival had begun. The first shot was fired not by humanity, but by the enemy. A massive energy beam, bright and terrifying, shot out from one of the leading ships of the enemy fleet. It cut through space like a blade, hitting one of Earth's outer defense stations with devastating force. The station erupted into flames, and debris scattered in every direction. The attack had begun, and it was far worse than anyone had imagined. "Return fire," General Harrison barked, his voice cutting through the panic that had swept through the crew. "Activate the shields and fire back with everything we have." In an instant, Earth's fleet responded. Weapons systems powered up, and the first volley of laser fire, ion beams, and missile strikes ripped through the blackness of space. The enemy ships, though massive and imposing, seemed almost unfazed by the barrage. They retaliated with deadly precision, firing back at Earth's fleet. The battle was on. Across the battlefield, ships collided in a violent symphony of explosions and flashing lights. Earth's warships, though strong and advanced, were outnumbered and outclassed in sheer size. But humanity had something the enemy had not counted on: a will to survive. The human fleet fought with everything it had, refusing to give an inch, no matter how hopeless it seemed. On Earth, the people watched as the battle unfolded. The screens in every home, every street, every public space broadcasted the chaos of space. The situation was dire. The enemy's ships were huge, their firepower overwhelming, but humanity wasn't going to surrender without a fight. The city streets were filled with soldiers, civilians, and families watching the conflict unfold, each person waiting for news of the battle. The fate of the planet hung in the balance. In space, the enemy's warships loomed large. They didn't seem to be in any rush. It was clear they were enjoying the fight. They had one goal: wipe humanity from existence. But Earth's forces were not giving up. Each ship, each soldier, each pilot was determined to keep the enemy from reaching their home planet. A new wave of attacks hit the Earth fleet. Alien energy blasts shattered ships, sending them spiraling into the void. But the human fleet kept fighting. The Terra Titan, led by General Harrison, charged forward, firing its heavy weapons at an enemy dreadnought. The Titan's laser cannons flared with blue intensity, and the massive ship fired a volley of missiles, which impacted against the enemy's shields with powerful explosions. Despite the loss of ships and casualties mounting on both sides, humanity had one advantage: fighting for their survival. The enemy had underestimated humanity's strength and resilience. Each time they thought they were winning, the humans proved them wrong. On Earth, the military leaders scrambled to adjust their strategies, working closely with the commanders in space. New tactics were devised, and ships were repositioned in attempts to gain the upper hand. But the battle was still far from over. For every ship the humans destroyed, the enemy seemed to send 2 more in retaliation. The true horror of the war was becoming evident. The enemy had vast numbers, but they were also highly disciplined and ruthless. Every blast from their weapons seemed to signal the end for humanity. Every loss, every piece of shattered metal in space, was a blow to Earth's resolve. But there was no turning back. Back in space, General Harrison was not giving up. His hands gripped the control panel with iron strength as the Terra Titan shook under the force of another enemy strike. Despite the damage, the crew continued to fight, their hearts steeled by the belief that they could still win. The general's eyes narrowed as the enemy fleet grew closer. This was not the time to retreat. This was humanity's last stand. "We've come too far," Harrison whispered to himself, watching as enemy ships advanced. "We can't let them win." Suddenly, a new transmission came through. Humanity's final weapon. The secret weapon that had been kept hidden until the very last moment. The Aegis, Earth's last hope, was ready to be deployed. It was a weapon unlike any other, a creation of humanity's best minds. Its power was unknown to the enemy, and it was humanity's last chance to turn the tide of war. The humans' final cry had been heard, and the galaxy would soon learn that Earth's last stand would not be the last battle fought. Not by a long shot. The war was far from over. As the battle raged on, Earth's fleet was on the brink of collapse. The enemy's overwhelming numbers and superior firepower had decimated many of the human ships. The Terra Titan, though still operational, had taken heavy damage. Its hull was scared, and its weapon systems were barely functioning. The crew, exhausted and battered, continued to fight with everything they had, but the odds were growing slimmer with each passing moment. General Harrison stood in the command center, staring at the view screens. His mind raced. They had already lost so much, and the enemy showed no signs of slowing down. The human fleet was stretched thin, and reinforcements were too far away to reach in time. Harrison knew this might be the end. The thought of humanity's extinction filled his mind. But there was still hope. The Aegis was the key. The Aegis was humanity's last, best hope. A weapon so powerful, so dangerous, that it had been kept hidden until the final moments of the war. It had been developed in secret by Earth's brightest minds, but its true power had never been tested until now. Harrison turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sharp, who was monitoring the situation. "Is it ready?" he asked, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. Sharp's face was pale, her eyes tired, but there was a fire in them. "Yes, General. The Aegis is fully operational. We just need to launch it." General Harrison nodded. The Aegis was stored aboard a classified facility, deep within the Terra Titan. Only a handful of people knew its exact location. It was a last-ditch effort, one that could change the course of the battle or destroy humanity once and for all. "Get it ready for launch," Harrison ordered, "and pray it works." The crew scrambled to prepare the weapon. The Aegis was not a conventional weapon like the others. It wasn't a missile or a laser. It was something far more sophisticated, designed to disrupt and dismantle the enemy's fleet in a way that no one could predict. But as powerful as it was also unpredictable. There were risks. The weapon had the potential to annihilate everything within its range, including Earth's own fleet. If they launched it, there was no turning back. The enemy continued to advance, seemingly unbothered by the human resistance. They had already shattered several human warships, leaving debris floating in space. It was clear that they were confident they had won, but they hadn't counted on humanity's final weapon. Ready to launch in 30 seconds, General, Sharp called out, her voice tense. The crew of the Terra Titan braced themselves for what was to come. Outside the ship, the enemy fleet seemed to grow larger, as if they were about to devour humanity. But the humans weren't done yet. Harrison looked at the view screen, taking in the vast enemy fleet. "This is it," he said quietly. "We fight for our survival now." A countdown began. The weapon would fire soon. Everyone on the bridge was silent, their eyes fixed on the countdown timer. It was humanity's last chance. 10 seconds, Sharp said, her voice shaking. She wasn't sure if she believed the weapon could work, but there was no other choice. The countdown reached 0. And then, with a thunderous noise that echoed through space, the Aegis was launched. The weapon tore through space, a brilliant streak of light that cut through the darkness. Its trajectory was direct, aimed at the heart of the enemy fleet. The Aegis was unlike anything the enemy had ever seen. It was a force of nature, a weapon that defied conventional laws of warfare. As the weapon neared the enemy fleet, a sudden shockwave erupted, and the enemy ships began to shake. The first wave of the Aegis's power hit with a tremendous force. The energy released was enough to tear through the shields of the enemy ships like paper. Entire ships disintegrated, their massive hulls collapsing inward in an instant. The destruction was so fast, so brutal, that the enemy fleet couldn't react in time. General Harrison watched the scene unfold on the view screen, his heart racing. It was working. The enemy was in disarray. Ships exploded, their remnants scattered into the void. The Aegis was tearing through them, leaving a path of devastation behind. The sheer power of the weapon was unlike anything humanity had ever imagined. It was the very thing the enemy had feared, and it was finally unleashed. But as the weapon continued to destroy the enemy fleet, something unexpected happened. The remaining enemy ships began to regroup, their formations shifting. They weren't retreating. They were adapting. And they had a new weapon. A massive ship, the largest of the enemy fleet, fired a counterstrike. The blast was so powerful that it shook the Terra Titan, knocking the crew off their feet. Alarms blared, and the bridge was filled with chaos as the crew scrambled to regain control. "General, the Aegis is losing power," Sharp shouted. "It can't sustain the attacks. We need to withdraw." Harrison's heart sank. The Aegis had given humanity a chance, but now it seemed that the enemy had found a way to counter it. The last hope of humanity was fading. But then, the unexpected happened. Just as the Aegis was about to lose its power, a sudden surge of energy rippled through the Terra Titan. The weapon had one final, hidden function, an emergency overload system. The weapon's energy output increased dramatically, and with it, the final wave of destruction struck. The enemy fleet, already weakened by the Aegis's previous attacks, was no match for the overload. The final strike shattered their ships, obliterating everything in its path. The Aegis had done it. The battle was over. The enemy fleet, once so massive and threatening, was no more. Humanity had won, against all odds. But the victory came at a cost. Many ships had been lost, and countless lives had been sacrificed. The war was over, but the scars would remain forever. General Harrison looked out at the remains of the enemy fleet, his heart heavy with the weight of the victory. Humanity had survived, but the horror of the battle would never be forgotten. And as the stars above Earth shined brighter than ever, they would forever carry the memory of the final weapon that saved humanity from extinction. The silence that followed the destruction of the enemy fleet was deafening. For the first time in what felt like years, the sounds of battle had ceased. No more explosions, no more weapons fire, just the eerie quiet of space. The Terra Titan drifted among the remnants of the enemy's fleet, a battered and broken hero amidst the debris of war. But despite the silence, the crew knew that the war was far from over. They had won the battle, but the scars of the conflict ran deep. General Harrison stood on the bridge, his eyes staring out at the void where the once mighty enemy fleet had stood. His heart was heavy, but there was no time for mourning. The cost of victory was steep. Hundreds of human lives had been lost in the battle, and many ships lay in ruins. But the most painful part was that the enemy's final attack had come with a price that no one had expected. "General," said Lieutenant Sharp, her voice quiet and steady despite the circumstances, "we've got readings. More enemy ships are on the way." Harrison turned to face her, his face grim. "How many?" Sharp paused, her fingers dancing across the console. The numbers were shocking. "At least 30 ships, General. Maybe more. They've been in hiding, waiting for this moment. They're coming fast." The enemy, it seemed, had not given up. Despite the catastrophic losses, they had regrouped, and now they were preparing for another assault. The remnants of their fleet were trying to escape, but some had remained hidden, planning their next move. The horror that had been unleashed across the stars was not over. The bridge crew exchanged worried glances. The Terra Titan was exhausted, its resources dwindling. The Aegis had worked, but it had also drained nearly all of their energy reserves. There was no time to rest, no time to rebuild. The war had only paused, not ended. "Prepare the fleet," Harrison ordered, his voice calm but firm. "We're not done yet." The crew moved quickly, pulling together what little they had left. The remaining ships in the human fleet, though damaged, were still operational. But it was clear that the fight ahead would be even harder. The Aegis had bought them time, but it couldn't win the war for them. Humanity would have to rely on its resilience, its determination, and its ability to adapt. As the crew worked, Harrison couldn't help but think about the price of victory. The weapon that had saved them had also caused untold destruction. The Aegis had obliterated the enemy fleet, but it had also left a wake of destruction in its path. Entire planets, once home to civilizations, had been reduced to rubble. The cost of war, of survival, had never been so clear. "General," said Sharp again, her voice tinged with concern, "the enemy fleet is almost in range." Harrison nodded. The final battle had begun. The fight for humanity's survival was not over, and it was clear that the enemy would not stop until they had wiped humanity from the galaxy. The question now was whether the human fleet could withstand this new assault. Could the Terra Titan and its crew hold their ground, or would they fall to the relentless power of the enemy? The crew scrambled to prepare. The weapons systems were online, but they were limited. The enemy's fleet was large and formidable, and their strategy was still unclear. Harrison watched as the enemy ships drew closer. They were coming in waves, perhaps hoping to overwhelm the remaining human forces with sheer numbers. But humanity had always been at its best when cornered. The final message to the galaxy, the last cry from Earth, had been heard. The Aegis had proven that humanity was not easily wiped out. Now, the true test would come. Could the human fleet fight back once more, or had they already given everything they had? The countdown to the next battle began. "We can do this," Harrison said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "We have to." As the enemy ships closed in, the Terra Titan powered up its remaining weapons. The crew stood at attention, ready for whatever came next. The fight for survival had reached its final stages. The horror that had spread across the stars was not finished. It was only beginning. The final weapon had been launched, and now humanity's final stand was about to begin. The terror that followed the ages would echo across the cosmos, but it would also ignite a fire in the hearts of those who fought for the survival of humanity. They had lost much, but they had not lost hope. The galaxy would soon know that humanity would not be so easily defeated, no matter the cost, no matter the odds. The final message had been sent, and humanity would fight until the very end. The Terra Titan and its fleet were bracing for impact. The enemy ships were closing in fast, their dark silhouettes looming in the distance like an approaching storm. The humans had given everything they had in the previous battle, but the enemies were relentless. They had regrouped and were now making their final push, with no intention of stopping until humanity was erased from the stars. But the humans were far from defeated. General Harrison stood on the bridge, his hands gripping the edge of the console. His face was tense, eyes narrowed as he studied the enemy fleet's movements. The enemy was trying to surround them, cutting off any escape route. Their strategy was clear. They planned to overwhelm the human forces with their sheer numbers, forcing them into submission. But Harrison knew something they didn't. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to win. "Prepare for battle," Harrison ordered, his voice steady but full of resolve. "This isn't just about surviving. It's about showing them what happens when they mess with humanity." The crew began to move swiftly, each member knowing their role. The weapons systems powered up again, and the shields on the remaining ships were reinforced. The enemy ships, massive and heavily armed, were closing in on all sides. But the Terra Titan wasn't alone. Humanity had learned from the last battle. They were ready for this. They had no choice but to be. Lieutenant Sharp, the lead tactician, was already scanning the enemy fleet. She knew their movements better than anyone. "General," she said, her voice sharp with determination, "they've broken into two waves. The first is coming in from the left flank, and the second is moving to our right. They're trying to split us." Harrison nodded grimly. "Keep the formation tight. We'll focus on the first wave and then shift to the second once it's engaged. No surprises, no mistakes." The human fleet shifted, positioning themselves in a line, ready for the incoming assault. The Terra Titan moved at the front, the flagship of the fleet, its weapon systems glowing a menacing red. Harrison watched as the enemy ships grew larger on the screen, their movements calculated and deadly. But there was something in their formations, something that made Harrison believe they were underestimating the humans. "All ships, open fire," Harrison commanded. The first wave of enemy ships fired their weapons with deadly precision, but the human fleet was already moving. The Terra Titan dodged the first round of blasts, using its advanced maneuvering systems to avoid the incoming fire. The human ships were smaller, more agile, and while they didn't have the sheer firepower of their enemies, they had something the enemy didn't: experience. "Target their lead ships," Harrison ordered. "Take out their command center." The weapons fired with precision, tearing through the enemy ranks. Explosions erupted in the darkness of space as the first few ships were obliterated. The enemy's momentum faltered, but they quickly adjusted, coming in harder and faster. Lieutenant Sharp analyzed the battlefield in real time. "They're regrouping, General. They're adapting." Harrison gritted his teeth. "Then we adapt too. All ships, shift fire to the right wave. They're trying to outflank us. Keep them on the defensive." The battle raged on, each side losing ships, but the humans held firm. The Terra Titan and the remaining fleet fought with everything they had, refusing to back down. Harrison could feel the weight of every decision, every shot fired. The cost of victory was growing higher with each passing moment. The enemy began to falter. Their initial assault had failed to break the human defenses, and now the second wave was struggling to gain ground. Harrison's plan was working. His ships were drawing the enemy in, forcing them to overextend their attacks. It was a dangerous strategy, but one that was paying off. The humans were taking casualties, but they were also inflicting devastating losses on their enemies. "General, they're pulling back," Sharp said, almost in disbelief. "They're retreating." Harrison stared at the redouts. The enemy ships were no longer charging forward. They were pulling back, regrouping at a distance. For a moment, it was almost like the storm had passed. The human fleet, battered and exhausted, stood victorious once again. The sound of gunfire had died down, replaced by the hum of the Terra Titan's engines. "We did it," Sharp said quietly, her voice full of disbelief. Harrison didn't answer right away. He was still processing the battlefield, watching as the enemy ships moved further away. The humans had won, but it felt like a fleeting victory. The cost of the battle had been immense, and the final push had taken everything from them. The enemy may have retreated for now, but Harrison knew this was far from over. "They'll be back," Harrison said, his voice low and heavy. "But we've shown them what happens when they challenge humanity. The galaxy knows now. Humanity is not to be underestimated." But even as he spoke, he couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest battles were still ahead. The enemy was gone for now, but the war was far from finished. And the next time they came, humanity would need to be ready. With that thought weighing heavily on his mind, Harrison turned to his crew. "Prepare for what's next. We rest for now. But the fight is far from over. And next time, we'll be even stronger." As the human fleet drifted in the silence of space, the crew knew that victory today didn't guarantee tomorrow. But for the first time in a long time, they allowed themselves a brief moment to breathe. The fight was far from over, but humanity had sent its message loud and clear. They were not done yet, and no matter the odds, they would never back down. In the aftermath of the battle, the Terra Titan and its fleet drifted silently in the cold void of space. The sounds of the engine's hum and the distant beeps of consoles were the only things breaking the silence. General Harrison stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared out into the darkness. The enemy was gone, for now, but the scars of the battle were etched deeply into his mind. The victory was hard-earned, but it came at a steep price. Dozens of human ships were lost, and many more were badly damaged. The fleet had taken heavy losses, and yet it still stood strong. They had fought as if they had nothing left to lose, but in truth, they had everything to fight for. "We did it," Lieutenant Sharp said quietly, her voice breaking through the silence. "We survived." Harrison didn't reply immediately. He was lost in thought, his mind racing through the events that had unfolded over the past days. The final wave of enemy ships had been driven back, but he knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning of something much larger. Humanity had sent a message, but the galaxy had yet to fully grasp what that message meant. The communications officer, Lieutenant Lawson, turned from her console. "General, we're receiving a transmission. It's from Earth." Harrison's heart skipped a beat. A message from Earth. Finally. The war had taken humanity far from their home planet, but it was still Earth that was the heart of it all. He stepped forward, his eyes focused as the transmission came through. The screen flickered for a moment, then cleared. On the screen appeared a familiar face, the face of the United Earth government's leader, President Carver. The president's expression was grim, but there was something else in his eyes, a deep pride. "General Harrison," President Carver said, his voice strong. "You've done what many thought impossible. You've sent a message across the stars, one that will be heard for generations. Humanity has shown that we are not to be taken lightly." Harrison nodded, even though he knew the president couldn't see him. "We've fought, Mr. President, but the enemy will be back. This isn't over yet." The president's face hardened. "We know. But what you've done today has changed everything. The galaxy knows now what happens when you challenge humanity. They know that we will fight to the bitter end. And that will make all the difference." Harrison felt a surge of pride, mixed with a deep sense of responsibility. This was more than just a battle. This was the future of humanity at stake. The message that had echoed across the stars was clear. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not to be underestimated. "We'll be ready," Harrison said firmly. "We'll make sure they know that this fight will not be forgotten. We will not stop. We will not surrender." The president nodded. "I have no doubt about that. Earth will stand with you. The entire galaxy will see the strength of humanity. You have proven what many believe to be impossible. But remember, General, this victory does not mark the end of our struggle. It is only the beginning." As the transmission ended, Harrison turned to face his crew. They were all watching him, their faces a mix of exhaustion and determination. The battle had been brutal, but they had survived. They had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. And now they had to prepare for whatever came next. "We've won a battle, but the war is far from over," Harrison said, his voice steady and resolute. "We've sent a message, but we'll need to send it again. And again. We will fight for humanity, for Earth, and for everyone who believes in us. The galaxy may be vast, but we are unyielding, and we will make sure that no one forgets the lesson we've taught today." The crew nodded in agreement, their faces hardening with resolve. They had sent their message across the stars, and it had been heard. But they knew the true test was yet to come. The galaxy would remember this day, but it would also remember that humanity could and would fight until the very end. Harrison looked out at the stars, his heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. There would be more battles, more challenges ahead. But humanity had shown its strength, and no matter what happened next, they would stand together. In the darkness of space, a new chapter had begun. The final cry of humanity had been heard, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The horror the enemies felt would echo long after the battle was over. Because one thing was certain, humanity would never back down. No matter the odds, no matter the cost, humanity would always rise again. And as Harrison watched the stars drift by, he knew one thing for sure: the fight was far from over.